A lot of people have taken Taco Bell items and turned them into a gourmet meal, but as far as I know, no one has ever taken a gourmet meat and put it into a regular Taco Bell item, and that's exactly what I intend to do. In this episode of the Studio Review, I'm taking some of the fanciest meat in the world and putting it into fast food. And I'm doing that to answer the question, does swapping out fast food ingredients elevate the experience, or is fast food great because we actually enjoy the quality exactly how it is? Because if these meats don't improve these items, I'm not sure what would. Alright, I'm going to be preparing 3 different items today with 3 different types of meat. At first, I'll just take a modest step up in quality, but by the end, things are going to get really absurd. We're going to start things off with a classic, the Whopper from Burger King. Instead of Burger King meat, I'm going to be using beef from a farm right here in my county. These Angus cows are grass-fed until they're 900 pounds, and then after that, they eat corn silage and brewer's grain from Devil's Backbone Brewery, which is also in Rockbridge County. They're also raised without hormones or antibiotics, and the meat is processed right here in town, about as farm-to-table as it gets. The price is $10 per pound. The way this will work is that I'll pick up 2 items from the restaurant and then swap the meat out on 1, so that way I can have a true head-to-head comparison. After tax, the 2 Whoppers came out to be $12.88. I don't know if you guys have had a Whopper recently, but it's got a pretty healthy diameter. The patty I had was a little bit thicker and not quite as wide, and I knew it would shrink when I cooked it. So I used a spatula to flatten it out a little bit, and when I got it to a size I felt good about, I sprinkled on a little salt and pepper. And next it was time to grill. I'm sure people will have lots of opinions or advice about how I grill stuff, but trust me, you're going to want to save it for later in the video. I gave it a couple flips just to make sure it was good to go, and then once it reached a good temperature, I brought it back inside. To assemble it, I flipped the Whopper upside down so I could get easy access to the burger patty. I only lost a little bit of ketchup, but I can live with that. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Despite my best efforts, the second one is definitely a little thicker, but I'm okay with that. Just as a reminder, I'm going to be testing to see whether the fancier meat elevates the quality and by how much. So if it only elevates it a little bit, it's almost definitely not worth the price of the meat or the prep time. However, if the end result elevates the quality significantly, we just might be revolutionizing the fast food industry. Okay, I got a taste of the Whopper for a baseline, the control for our experiment, if you will. It's a solid burger. I feel like between the Whopper and maybe like a Dave's Triple or a Dave's Double from Wendy's. Kind of a toss-up for like the best fast food burger, not including like Five Guys in that. Typically very fresh lettuce, tomato, and onion. As for the Whopper featuring the local beef, I was surprised to find that the difference wasn't immediately obvious in the first bite. There's just a lot going on in terms of sauces and toppings. The local beef is definitely better, but it's hard to say by how much. The more you get into like the center of the patty, the more it's noticeable, but that first bite like wasn't crazy different. One thing that Burger King does do really well is that like flame broiled flavor, so it almost tastes like it was like grilled on a backyard grill. I would say overall, this meat definitely elevates the quality of the Whopper, but not significantly, or at least not enough to justify cooking a separate burger. Would I recommend this meat for your next cookout? Yes, absolutely. But if you're gonna be cooking anyway, go ahead and use your own bun and your own toppings. We're gonna leave the Whopper alone. Okay, next we're gonna scale up the fanciness of the meat, and this time it's with the Filet-O-Fish from McDonald's, my friend Josh's favorite food.
I hate fish.
The prep for this one is going to be a little more complicated because the fish is breaded. Typically, the Filet-O-Fish is made with Alaskan pollock, at least in America. It actually varies from region to region. Instead of Alaskan pollock, I'm going to be using Chilean sea bass. Chilean sea bass is a fish found in the waters off the coast of Chile and other South American countries, as well as Antarctica. And it's also known as a Patagonian toothfish or an Antarctic toothfish. It's served in a lot of fine dining establishments. I bought about 11 ounces for $28.99, which comes out to $42 per pound. Some have described the flavor of Chilean sea bass as being similar to cod, which is actually what they used to make the Filet-O-Fish out of. A couple hours beforehand, I sliced the fish into thinner sections so it would be similar in size to the FOF. And then I salted both sides and put it back in the fridge. Before I started the frying process, I prepped everything and then went to pick up the 2 Filet-O-Fishes. Or would it be Filets-O-Fish? Like, you know how the plural of attorney general is attorneys general? I don't know. I wasn't expecting this, but I guess there's some sort of buy one, get one for $1 promotion for these. Each by itself is $5, but I only paid $6.85 for the 2. And while I show you how I fried the Chilean sea bass, I'd love to tell you about Factor, who's the sponsor of this episode. Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. And trust me, it's way easier and less expensive than what I'm currently doing. With this setup, I have 3 different dishes. So you coat the fish in the flour dredge and then dip it in the batter, which has the same ingredients as the dredge, plus eggs and seltzer water. And then you finish it off with the panko breading. And it's turning out out beautifully, but it ends up making a mess. Lots of cleanup after. Factor, on the other hand, eliminates the stress of prepping, cooking, and cleaning. Their restaurant quality meals are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. 2 minutes is about how long I thought it would take to preheat the frying oil, but it took way longer. I'm doing this on the side burner of my grill so that my kitchen doesn't smell like fish for the next week. Factor also offers loads of snack options, so you can keep your fridge well stocked with things like small bites, juices, and protein shakes. I can't get enough of this cold brew latte protein shake. They also sent me this whey protein, which will be super helpful to have pre-portioned packets when I travel. Now it's probably a good time to mention that I've never fried fish before. I've fried wings, I've fried chicken, but this is actually my first time frying fish. Fortunately for me, my lack of cooking experience doesn't limit the variety I can get with Factor. When I'm really busy, like if I'm editing a video for days at a time, having Factor in the fridge is a lifesaver because it means I don't have to sacrifice clean eating for convenience. So while I transfer this fish to the oil, you can head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code REVUE50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code REVUE50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. All right, here's the thing about this frying process. Almost immediately, the breading looked way darker than I was hoping for. I mean, that's so burnt. I was going for a golden color, you know, like the Filet-O-Fish, and almost immediately things looked straight up brown. I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments, but here's where I think I went wrong. I was so impatient waiting for the temperature of the oil to get to like the 360 range that as soon as it got close, I put the fish right in. Meanwhile, the temperature just kept rising and I didn't adjust the heat at all, so it shot right past 360 and up to almost 400 before I could turn down the heat. What I think I should have done is got the temperature to plateau for several minutes before putting the fish in to make 100% certain that it wouldn't get too hot. Obviously, this was a pretty expensive mistake to make, so I still tasted it and I even tried scraping off the burnt layer of breading, but it was pretty far gone. Luckily, I had breaded the other 2 slices of sea bass and cooked them in the oven, so not all hope was lost. I thought removing the original square of fish from the cheese and tartar sauce was going to be much more difficult, but it pretty much came right off. I was able to save the vast majority of the tartar sauce on the top bun, and then it was just a matter of assembly. So here's the side-by-side comparison, and I know the sea bass looks way lighter in color than it should, but I promise it's cooked to the appropriate internal temperature. I've never been a big Filet-O-Fish guy. I should say that I have like a healthy skepticism of fast food seafood in general, Captain D's, Long John Silver's, etc. But it's also not like repulsive to me. I'd say this one had a fairly medium taste. Not great, not terrible. Okay, now for the Chilean sea bass, or as we like to call it, the Patagonian toothfish. I don't even know if I want to try this other one. Coming off the heels of my frying fiasco, I was fully expecting this to be a lost cause. However, oh wow, okay. This ended up being delicious. That's actually really good. The sea bass was just drastically more flavorful than the McDonald's pollock, like leaps and bounds. Okay, that is way better. I was worried it was going to be worse. This significantly elevates the quality of the Filet-O-Fish. Just no comparison here. I kind of expected all the results in this episode to be like, hey, we eat fast food because we want fast food quality. But after this, I don't think I can go back to a regular FOF. That's crazy. Okay, next up, for what possibly could be my magnum opus, I'm going to be putting Kobe beef on a cheesy gordita crunch from Taco Bell. So I actually had to get educated about meat and meat quality before going down this road. If you've seen the channel before, you know I'm an Outback Steakhouse guy. This is all new territory for me. So you may already know this, but I'm going to share some of my newfound internet knowledge. Some of the most valuable beef in the world is called Wagyu, and that word has to do with the type of cow and how they're bred and raised. One of the most distinctive characteristics of Wagyu beef is the way that the meat is marbled, and that's from the way the fat and the muscle develops in these cows. It creates a very distinctive flavor and texture. Now there's Australian Wagyu and American Wagyu, but the most highly regarded Wagyu is from Japan. They have a rating scale for the quality of the beef, and A5 is the highest quality. All that being said, Kobe is a very specific type of Wagyu. It has to come from a specific region of Japan, and I believe from like a specific genetic lineage of cows in order to be true Kobe beef. It's like how technically it shouldn't be called champagne unless the grapes are actually from the Champagne region of France. I think. I had thought I'd seen stuff advertised as Kobe before, but as it turns out, it is very hard to come by. There are only like 8 or 9 restaurants and just a handful of distributors in the whole US who are authorized to sell it. It is possible to buy authentic Japanese A5 Kobe beef online, but the going price is about $800 per pound. I didn't get a pound. I got a 4-ounce strip loin block. I'll let you do the math on that one. Apparently there's a limited amount of Kobe beef exported from Japan each year, so once it's gone, it's gone. Mine arrived on dry ice from an authorized distributor in California, and it came with a handwritten note and a certificate of authenticity. I can't read Japanese, but I think this is all the details about the cows and their lineage. And it even has a picture of the cow farmers on it. I feel like a new side quest should be for me to go find these guys and get a group picture together, but I have to stay focused. So that's the meat we're putting on an item from Taco Bell. The cheesy gordita crunch, to be specific. The cheesy G usually comes with ground beef, but since the marble texture is what makes Wagyu special, the second you grind it up, it kind of loses its value. So I'm gonna cook it as is and then slice it into strips. And to make it a 1-to-1 comparison, I'll just order the cheesy gordita crunch with steak instead of ground beef. Before getting the Taco Bell, I brought the beef to room temperature and seasoned it with some light salt and pepper. I know there are a lot of fancy seasonings out there, but I wanted the Wagyu to speak for itself. I don't want seasoning to overpower the flavor. Okay, I left to get the cheesy gordita crunches. Or cheesy gorditas crunch. No, right? I ordered one with steak and the other with no meat at all, which kind of threw them for a loop.
When it's at steak, did you just want nothing on the
Yeah, no meat on the other one.
Alright, no meat on the other one. On the first one I had steak, but on the other one, no meat.
Once I got back, it was time to cook the steak, and considering how badly I had messed up the fish and how I really only had one shot with this 4-ounce block, I was really nervous. I decided to go cast iron skillet with about a tablespoon of butter. I preheated the pan this time to make sure there wouldn't be any major temperature variations during the cooking process. My goal was to end with a medium rare steak. I went ahead and just took the plunge, and then I started my watch to make sure I had a clear idea of how much time had passed. After a few minutes, I went ahead and flipped it just to make sure I wasn't overdoing it, and the color was beautiful. Really solid sear. I did a similar amount of time on the other side and then made sure to sear all the edges. This thing was smelling so good. The internal temperature wasn't quite where I wanted it to be just yet, so I let it cook for a little bit longer. The plan was to remove it when it was about 5 degrees shy of the goal range and then cover it and allow it to rest. Again, you probably already know this, but that allows the juices to absorb into the meat, and it's also known as carryover cooking because the heat will continue to make its way towards the center. While that was taking place, I got the cheesy gordita crunch ready to go. And after what felt like forever, it was finally time for the moment of truth. I knew I had cooked it to an appropriate temperature, but I was honestly so relieved to see that it was the exact color that I was going for. It looked so good, and I knew I needed to put some of it into the taco shell, but I couldn't help myself from just taking a bite. And this probably goes without saying, but it was just far and away the best steak I've ever had.
It is so tender. I mean, I barely have to chew it.
But that's not what this episode is about. This episode is about whether this gourmet meat is going to elevate the quality of this fast food item to a whole new level.
If you've watched the channel before, you know that the cheesy gordita crunch, in my opinion, is the perfect fast food item. So I'm already a little hesitant subbing out the ground beef for the steak. That being said, I am really excited to try it with the Kobe beef. Okay, here we go.
My initial thoughts were that there's definitely an improvement in flavor and in texture and like substance. The Taco Bell steak is pretty thin, and this obviously was like a thicker slice, so just more to chew on. The quality of the meat is just undeniable.
I'd almost say that the sauce from the cheesy gordita crunch overpowers the flavor profile of the steak a little bit. Gosh, as good as that steak is, I think I gotta say keep them separate. That steak is a standalone dish, and honestly, cheesy gordita crunch, pretty dang good with ground beef. And steak, but I prefer ground beef. Doesn't mean I'm not gonna finish this though.
Like, you would pile toppings onto a baked potato because there's not much there in terms of flavor. But you don't need that much on a sweet potato because it already has a lot going on. And the Kobe beef is the sweet potato in this situation. That's a bad analogy, I don't know. So just to recap those results, Whopper, leave it as is. Filet-O-Fish, upgrade that thing all day. And the cheesy gordita crunch, you gotta make like Lennon and McCartney and just let it be. And just for the record, I would fully endorse eating each of these meats on their own. There's a reason that they're more expensive. I know videos like this can seem a little frivolous, but honestly, they're only possible because of people like you watching and because of sponsors like Factor. I also went and totaled up the cost of all the meat in this video and made an equivalent donation to a relief organization fighting food insecurity in my area. I'll be back in a couple weeks with new episodes, but in the meantime, just remember that even when it doesn't feel like it, it's gonna be okay. I'll see you soon.